Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, or welcome back. So my name is Katie. If you guys are new, welcome, and I'm going to be doing update number 7 for my Pan Those Eyeshadows. So this is going to be a slightly different update for me from the way I normally do them. For those of you guys who don't know, I did have surgery on my leg about 5 days ago. I will have the video explaining that situation linked down below and in the cards if you guys are curious. I mean, I'm recovering, but it's definitely not going as quickly as I had hoped it would. So I did want to have this up sooner rather than later so that the updates are roughly a month apart. So I thought I would film it, and we're gonna make some tweaks for this month and this month only. I should be back to normal by next month, or at least as normal as filming videos requires. That also explains the background and the lighting. It's a little weird, but I currently can't go downstairs, so I'm making do with best that I can in my bedroom. It's not perfect, but this is a very temporary. So anyway, so let's get into it. So I have a lot to talk about this update. So we're gonna start off with my shadows and my progress. Then we're going to talk about some new rules that I'm bringing in for the project going forward. Then we're gonna talk about pan percentage, roll my new shadows, and I'm going to show you some looks, mostly in that order. So let's start off with my shadows. I will throw on screen a photo of the color story that I've been working with for the last month. Very easy to work with, neutrals with a pop of purple, which I'm never going to be mad about a little bit of a pop of purple. So say that 5 times fast. I generally like to go from least used to most used. So my least used shadow overall was the shade Cheese and Parties from the Melt Cheese and Parties palette. And so this was a gorgeous burgundy shade. I rolled this in last month and I've used it 6 times since the last update for 6 uses total. And this has a very small dip going on in it. Generally I use this with a very small brush as an outer third shade, outer half shade, and I don't have a lot of eyelid space, so it kind of is what it is, or I'll run it along the lower lash line because it's not intensely metallic. So I generally don't use this as an all over lid shade. I have a couple of times, but it is pretty intense for that, for like everyday sort of purposes. I would like to see a little bit more of just an increase in the dip on this going forward for the next update. I don't know if it's going to be possible to pan a melt shimmer in 30 uses, which is my usage goal for this project. I've had a couple of mattes in here and have panned them with varying degrees of success, and melt shadows are generally very pigmented, so a little goes a long way. So I am making no progresses of a pan on this, but I'm going to at least try to use my best to use it and figure out ways to use it that I enjoy. Not that that has been a challenge. I love shades like this. Clearly, look at my eyeshadow today. So moving on, I have the shade Mochi from the Melt Gemini palette. I like melt shadows. I think that's a theme here. So this is a really interesting sort of mustardy, greenish mustardy shade, and I have used this 6 times since the last update for 11 uses total. I found with this, I've mainly been using it as a transition shade with a really light fluffy brush, and I find if you do that, it doesn't pull as greenish, and you can kind of make it work as a transition for warmer toned, not that this isn't warm toned, but for more bronzy orangey shades. So that's kind of mostly what I've been doing. For this next update, I would really like to see a little bit more of a dip going on in this because it really doesn't look that used for 11 uses total. So I definitely would like to step it up with this one a little bit, and I think as it starts to cool down and head into fall, I'll be reaching for this palette and the shade a lot more. So next up, I have the shade Dayspring from my Natasha Denona Sunrise palette. Now this, I have rearranged my palette since bringing this into the project, so I've also used this 6 times since the last update for 11 uses total. This has been in for a little longer than Mochi, and I think I said in the last update that I was happy to have this in for a while as like a safety shade. I think this month I've decided that I would like to start focusing on this a little bit more. For those of you guys who don't know, I am heading back to the classroom, albeit in a limited capacity this month, so I think this will be a really great, easy one and done sort of shadow with something in the crease for days where, you know, I have like an early morning, or I just want to look put together without putting in too much effort, which I think is like the mood for this month, at least until I'm back on my feet a little bit more. So I think I'm going to try to focus on this one a little bit more for the next month. I don't know if I'll necessarily have it panned by the next month, but I think by the update after that, I definitely should be able to get there. Okay, next up I have my first pan of this update, and that was the shade Total Immortal from the Melt Cheese and Parties palette, and I brought this in I think 2 or 3 months ago. I've used this 8 additional times this month for 10 uses total. I really enjoyed using the shade as a transition shade. It made me reach for this palette a lot more, so I was happy to have this in, and I honestly was not expecting to hit pan on this. I had a melt shadow in my original quint, and it took me like 35 uses in this project alone and probably 15 to 20 not in this project, and I still didn't hit pan. So melt shadows, like I said, are very pigmented and you don't need a whole lot, so I didn't expect to see pan on this, but I think a couple of days before I was set to film my first update, I noticed that I was getting really close, and 4 days of purple eyeshadow later, I had a very tiny pan. I've definitely enjoyed having this in, but I'm also going to be happy to roll it out. And last but not least, I have the shade Moo from my ABH Carly Bible palette. Now this is the sort of tweak that I'm making for this month. I did bring this back to the city. I did go back like the night before my surgery, so I had taken photos of this palette and my bonus pans as like the top of my to-do list once I got home so I wouldn't forget, and then like 2 minutes after I got home, the hospital called and told me I had to be there at 5:30 in the morning. It was like 7 7 p.m. So needless to say, logistics needed to be sorted and I completely forgot. So because I don't have this physically on me to show you guys that I panned it, I am going to be keeping this in and like officially rolling it out next month. But because I do have a pan on this, I am going to be rolling in a 6th shade for this month. So that's kind of how this is going to work. But I did use this 21 times and I did hit a very tiny pan, but a pan nonetheless. I think in the interest of getting this up, I am going to just opt to roll this out next month because I am quite overdue. So I have hit pan on this one. I will show you guys that next month and we will officially roll this out in September. That is my recap of my progress and my shadows for this month. I do have 2 rollouts, which means that I get to bring in 2 new shades, which is always exciting. But before I do that, let's just talk really quickly about the new rules that I'm going to be bringing in. So the first one is just sort of like a blackout period on new palettes before they're eligible to be rolled into this project. I was gifted a new palette a couple weeks ago and then I do have 2 more on their way to me. So I wanted to make sure that I had some time to get to know those ones before they're eligible to be rolled into a project, this project specifically. So what I'm going to do is for my newest palette that I actually have, I'm not going to add that to my list of things to be rolled into this project up until the next update. My 2 newest palettes probably won't get here until closer to my next update, so those are not going to be eligible to roll in until probably October. So that's how that's going to work. So the second rule is just going to be looking at like the context of my collection as a whole. Now for those of you guys who don't know, I do have a smaller collection and about 1/3 of my palettes count as mini palettes. So basically what that means is that my bigger palettes have just a much higher statistical likelihood of ending up in this project overall. So because I am bringing in a 30 pan this month, I just want to make sure that that is not going to take over this project. So I'm going to cap things at 3 shades in the same palette max going forward, and then if I do get any other ones, I'll just re-roll until I get something that isn't from that palette. So I recently decided to migrate all of my non-pan shadows that were eligible to be in a project into a separate Excel spreadsheet. So I'm going to be picking from there. So I have like filtered it a little bit based on the palettes that I actually have in my possession right now so that I can swatch and all that good stuff. So I rolled the shades 25 and 16, which are Sinful from the Pat McGrath Mini Sublime and Leo from the Melt Gemini respectively. So I'm really excited about these. These are sort of fun. Sinful is sort of like a really pale greenish sort of tinged gold, and then Leo is a forest green, and I've been wondering when I was going to get a green in this project. I knew it was going to happen at some point and it did, so I'm really happy about that. So I really quickly swatched everything out, and so this is what I'm working with and I am really happy about this. This is sort of a questionable swatch across my knuckles here, but basically I think all of these guys are going to work well together, these guys will work well together, and I'm sure I'll be able to have some fun combining them. So I'm really excited about this new color story. I think it'll be a lot of fun to work with, and I feel like it's really nice for that sort of end of summer, early fall period. So I'm really excited to work with this. If you have any ideas for eye looks and stuff that I could do, feel free to let me know down below. So let's move on to pan percentage. So that has changed a little bit, and I did forget to mention in my first rule that I will be counting new palettes as part of my pan percentage, even if they're not eligible to be in this project yet. So as of last month, I did realize when I was migrating things over that I did miscount the number of pans in my collection. So as of last month, I was at 14 out of 98, which was about 13.5%, and I'm now up to 20 out of 108, which is about 18.5%. So I'm really happy with that. I don't have like specific goals, but it is nice to see it increase because I hit like 4 bonus pans this month. So the only bonus pan that I actually have in a palette that I have on me is the shade Luna from my Melt Gemini palette, which was in my original quint, and that was the one that I used like 35 times in this project and probably about 15 or so times prior to putting it in this project, and I only recently hit pan. It took me like I think 3 more uses after rolling it out, and here we are. So I knew I was really close. But still a very tiny pan, which I think says a lot about getting your money's worth out of Melt Shadows. Having said that, that is the only one that I actually physically have on me right now, so I will show you the other 3 once I'm back in my apartment, but I did hit pan on Bible from the ABH Carly Bible, and then Love and Dreamer from the ABH Norvina. So I did have 4 bonus pans this month in addition to the 2 in this project, so 6 overall, which is exciting. That doesn't happen to me very often because most of the palettes in my collection are new-ish, so of course most of them are ABH shadows, but you know, it is what it is. So anyway, I'm happy with that. So my pan percentage has actually increased from 13.5 to 18.5, which is not too shabby. However, having said that, with the 2 new additions, I do expect that this will drop down to like about 14%, 13-14% by the next update if I don't hit any pans by next month, which I might not. We'll see how that goes. But anyway, so that is sort of the summary. So let's move on to all of the eyeshadow looks that I remember to photograph this month, which was 3. I'm normally a little bit better than this, but it's kind of been a weird month, and I wasn't loving a lot of the looks that I used using Moo as like an all over lid shade or even as a partial lid shade. I only really like it, I think, on my skin tone as an inner corner highlight. So the first one that I remembered to photograph was this all over all matte purple look. I used Total Immortal as the lower lash line, all over the lid, and then blended up into the crease. I did run a white eyeliner through my lower waterline, put on mascara, and I was good to go. And I really like this. I don't do all matte looks a whole lot because I find that for me and my limited lid space and small eyes, I personally prefer a little bit of a shimmer, especially on the lighter side of things, just to kind of open things up. But this was fun and I would definitely do it again, especially if I were wearing like a coordinating color. So this was fun and I'm glad I got out of my comfort zone and did something that I don't normally do. Alright, next up, also using the She's in Parties. So I used Total Immortal as a transition shade, Last Caress through the crease, and both of those along the lower lash line. And then I used Strange Love as a lid shade, Sleepwalk as my outer third, and then I used She's in Parties just a little bit to sort of bridge those two colors together, and then Moo as an inner corner highlight. And lastly, this was sort of like the turned up version of the last look. So I used Total Immortal as a transition shade, Last Caress in the crease, same thing along the lower lash line, and then I used She's in Parties as an all over lid shade and Moo as my inner corner highlight. This is honestly pretty intense, but I did really enjoy it and I definitely would wear it more, I think, especially in the fall and winter. We do have some gloomy days and I feel like that would be really appropriate, and I have a sweater that would match this perfectly. So those are all of the looks that I remembered to photograph this month, and that brings me to the end of this video. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you're still here, if you enjoyed the video, feel free to give it a like. If you haven't already subscribed and you want to see more of my face, I upload new beauty videos roughly once a week, so feel free to hit that subscribe button if that floats your boat, and hopefully I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!